The first spark. It was just another day in the vast corridors of the United Intergalactic Command's flagship, the Unity. Commander Alexis Grant stood before the panoramic window, gazing out into the inky void of space. The stars twinkled in distant brilliance, and the hum of the ship's engines provided a quiet rhythm to her thoughts. Yet, in the stillness of the command deck, a storm was brewing. "You're quiet today, Commander," Lieutenant Harper said, approaching her from behind. Harper had been her second-in-command for 5 years, and in that time, he'd become as familiar as the ship's own deck plates. He had a sharp mind, quick reflexes, and a dry sense of humor that kept the crew on their toes. "I was just thinking about the fleet," Alexis replied, her voice steady but tinged with unease. "It's been too quiet lately. Too predictable." Harper raised an eyebrow, an amused grin tugging at the corner of his lips. "Is that your way of saying you're bored, Commander?" "I'm not bored," Alexis said, turning her gaze to the infinite blackness of space. "I'm worried." Harper didn't respond right away, but his expression shifted, growing more serious. "Worried about what, exactly?" The silence stretched for a moment before Alexis spoke again. "About the peace that's been holding for the last 2 decades. It's fragile. The galaxy's been calm, but there's a storm on the horizon. One we don't see coming." Harper's grin faded, and he took a step back, his expression darkening. "You think the alliance is about to break? You think the Trontari are going to make a move?" The mention of the Trontari was enough to make even the most seasoned officers uncomfortable. The Trontari were a massive, expansionist species, their warships like floating fortresses that commanded fear wherever they went. Their history was a trail of bloody conquest, and though they had been relatively quiet for the past 2 decades, their intentions were always uncertain. The humans had spent years on high alert, waiting for the day the Trontari would resume their hunger for more territory. "I don't know," Alexis said, her voice quiet but resolute. "But something's wrong. The balance is shifting. We can feel it." The calm of the Unity didn't last much longer. The ship's systems buzzed to life as a red alert flashed on the control panels. Alexis's eyes widened in disbelief as the sensors began to light up with activity. Ships appeared out of nowhere, dozens of them, emerging from the rift between star systems, all Trontari warships. "Commander," Harper's voice cut through her thoughts, sharp and focused. "We've got incoming. A full fleet of Trontari warships. This is no drill." The color drained from Alexis's face. This was it. The war they had feared for so long was finally happening. There was no time to hesitate, no room for second-guessing. She took a deep breath and turned to her crew. "Sound the general quarters," Alexis ordered. "Prepare for battle stations. It's time to show the galaxy what humanity is capable of." The crew of the Unity scrambled into action, moving with practiced efficiency as the hum of the ship's engines shifted to a deeper, more urgent frequency. Alexis could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her chest, but she stood tall. There was no room for fear now. Only resolve. The holographic display in front of her flickered as the Trontari ships neared. Their massive silhouettes loomed large on the screen, an imposing force that made the Unity seem small in comparison. It wasn't just the number of ships, it was their firepower. The Trontari didn't take risks. They annihilated anything in their path. "Get us into a defensive formation." Alexis barked to Harper, who was already coordinating with the tactical officers. "Prepare to fire at will. Let's make sure they know we're not going down without a fight." The Unity shuddered as its weapons systems powered up, and the first salvo of plasma fire erupted from its cannons. It was a direct hit, but the Trontari warships responded with an overwhelming barrage of their own. The Unity rocked violently, alarms blaring as hull plating groaned under the assault. "Shields are holding, Commander," Lieutenant Harper said, his voice tight with concentration. "But they're weakening. We can't take much more of this." Alexis's mind raced. The Trontari's strategy was clear: they were overwhelming the Unity with sheer force. They wanted to cripple the flagship, sending a message to the rest of the galaxy that humanity's dominance was over. The pressure was mounting, but Alexis wasn't about to let her crew fall without a fight. Target their shield generators, Alexis ordered. All guns, focus on the lead warship. Take out their weapons systems. The Unity's cannons roared to life, sending volley after volley of plasma fire into the heart of the enemy formation. The Trontari ships returned fire with unrelenting precision, but Alexis could see it, just the faintest crack in their shield. The Unity wasn't out yet. But as the battle raged on, it became clear that the situation was escalating beyond anyone's control. The Trontari fleet wasn't just trying to disable the Unity, they were preparing to break the entire line of defense for humanity's outer colonies. Commander. Harper's voice broke through the chaos, laced with alarm. We've got multiple breaches in the outer hull. We can't keep this up much longer. Alexis's heart skipped a beat. The Unity was losing the fight. The Trontari had the upper hand, and without reinforcements, humanity's future hung in the balance. The battle raged on for what felt like hours, the pressure mounting with each passing minute. Despite their best efforts, the Unity was slowly being overwhelmed. Alexis watched as more and more of her crew worked tirelessly, their faces strained with exhaustion. The ship's systems were on the brink of collapse, and the Trontari had yet to show any sign of retreat. Commander, Harper said quietly, we can't keep this up much longer. We need reinforcements, now. Alexis's mind raced. She had always been prepared for the day the Trontari might strike, but nothing had prepared her for this kind of attack. The Unity wasn't just facing an invasion, it was a test, a challenge to humanity's very survival. But that's when she realized something. Humanity had been underestimated for too long. The galaxy had watched as humanity built its power, and yet no one had ever expected them to fight back, really fight back. No one had ever seen what humans were truly capable of. Get me a direct line to High Command, Alexis ordered, her voice unwavering despite the growing crisis. I need reinforcements. And if they can't send them, we'll take matters into our own hands. Harper looked up, his eyes wide. Commander, are you? Yes, Alexis replied firmly. We're not waiting for them. Humanity is breaking today, Harper. But it's not the kind of break anyone expects. She turned back to the viewscreen, watching as the Trontari fleet loomed larger in the distance. There was a fire in her eyes now, a fire that wouldn't be extinguished until humanity made its stand. Prepare the secondary weapons array, Alexis said, her voice cold and fierce. We're going to show the Trontari that humanity doesn't break, it fights back. The breaking point. The Unity was no longer the ship it had been hours ago. What had started as a well-coordinated defense against the Trontari invasion was quickly turning into a struggle for survival. The ship was battered, its hull scarred by repeated plasma bursts, and the faint whine of damaged systems reverberated through the corridors. The air was thick with the smell of overheated machinery and the sharp, acrid tang of burning metal. Kara's hands were steady as she gripped the controls in front of her, but inside, she was a storm of frustration and determination. The Trontari had taken advantage of every mistake they could find, exploiting weaknesses she had missed. Despite her crew's best efforts, despite the strength of the Unity's weapons, the relentless assault had drained the ship's energy reserves, and the Trontari were not relenting. Damage report. Kara called out, her voice firm as she turned to face her chief engineer, Commander Morrow, who had been overseeing repairs under extreme pressure. We've got critical systems down across 3 levels, Morrow replied, her voice tight. Shields are at 45%. Life support systems are stabilizing, but the main reactors are overloaded. We can't keep this up much longer, Commander. If we don't get some time to regroup, we'll be sitting ducks. Alexis stood at the rear of the control room, her eyes scanning the situation. She didn't need to hear the full report to know the severity of the situation. The Unity was losing. The fight was not going as planned. They needed reinforcements. They needed a miracle. But then Alexis felt the weight of her own thoughts. Humanity wasn't going to be saved by a miracle. Humanity had always survived, not through luck or external help, but by their ability to adapt, to overcome, to push through the darkest moments with grit and determination. Today, the galaxy would see what humanity was truly made of. "We can't rely on high command," Alexis said, her voice ringing out through the control room. "We've waited long enough for them to come through. Now, we fight on our own terms. Prepare the secondary weapons array." The officers turned to her in surprise. "Commander, are you sure?" "That array isn't." "I know what it is," Alexis interrupted. "And we're going to use it. The Trontari are about to find out that humanity doesn't break under pressure." The secondary weapons array was humanity's secret. A last resort. A devastating weapon designed to shift the tide of battle in the event of an overwhelming enemy force. It was a dangerous gambit, one that carried with it significant risk, not just to the enemy, but to the Unity itself. But Alexis didn't see it as a choice. She saw it as the only option left. Harper, standing near the command console, exchanged a look with Lieutenant Vera, the ship's tactical officer. "You heard her," Harper said. "Let's do this." With the decision made, the crew sprang into action. Tactical teams scrambled to interface with the weapons systems, and the ship's AI began the delicate process of rerouting power to the secondary array. Alexis could feel the tension in the air. Everyone knew what this meant. If they couldn't get the weapon fully online, the Unity would be a sitting target, and they'd have no way of fighting back. There was no room for error. "We've got 5 minutes," Vera called out from the comms station. "The secondary array is coming online." "Commander, are you sure you want to do this?" "This weapon?" "I'm sure," Alexis said, cutting her off. "Give me the coordinates for the Trontari flagship." Vera input the data into the system, and a holographic map of the Trontari fleet flickered to life before Alexis's eyes. The fleet had already positioned itself for a final, devastating assault. They had every intention of wiping out humanity's greatest ship and sending a message to the rest of the galaxy. "We're targeting their command ship," Alexis said, pointing to the massive Trontari flagship at the heart of the enemy formation. "Once we launch this, we have seconds to escape before the array's feedback hits us." "Understood," Vera replied, her fingers flying across the interface. Secondary weapons array is online and locked onto target. 30 seconds to launch. Alexis's heart pounded in her chest. It wasn't just a matter of victory or defeat anymore. This was their moment to prove something. To prove that humanity could not just survive, it could strike back with everything it had. The countdown echoed through the command deck. 20 seconds. Kara's mind raced. The plan was risky, too risky. But there was no going back now. The Trontari had underestimated humanity, and that would be their fatal mistake. She had seen the destruction the Unity had faced, and now it was time to turn the tables. "Prepare to fire," Kara shouted, her eyes locked on the screen as the seconds ticked down. 10 seconds. Locking on target. 5 seconds. Alexis stood tall, her hands gripping the console as the weapons systems powered up. The energy levels spiked, and she could feel the vibration of the Unity's hull in her bones. This was it. Humanity's last stand. The explosion was blinding. The secondary array launched with a force that shook the Unity to its core. Kara's body was slammed back into her chair, the energy surge rattling her vision. The Trontari flagship, once an imposing monument to their power, disintegrated in an instant. A brilliant ball of fire engulfed the ship, sending shockwaves through the rest of the fleet. Alexis watched as the Trontari ships began to scatter, their formation collapsing in disarray. The Unity had just taken down their flagship, one strike, and the enemy was thrown into chaos. We've done it, Kara breathed, disbelief evident in her voice. But Alexis wasn't celebrating yet. They had one shot, and it had worked. The Trontari were retreating, but she couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of something far larger than they had anticipated. The attack had proven humanity's ability to strike back, but it had also painted a target on their backs. The war had begun, and there was no turning back now. Harper, Alexis said, her voice steady but serious. Status report. We've got them on the run, Commander, Harper said, his voice tight with relief. But we're not out of the woods yet. They'll regroup. I know, Alexis replied. Prepare for counterattack. The fight's just begun. The victory was fleeting. While the Trontari fleet had been thrown into disarray, the galaxy was shifting. The Trontari would come again, and when they did, they would bring everything they had. But today, humanity had proven something no one had expected, that they could not just survive, they could fight back with a fury that would reshape the galaxy's future. In the quiet moments that followed, as the Unity drifted through the debris field left behind by the Trontari flagship, Alexis allowed herself a brief moment of reflection. Humanity had reached its breaking point, but they hadn't broken. They had just begun to fight. Commander, Harper said, his voice breaking through the silence. You've done it. We've turned the tide. Alexis stood, looking out at the field of burning wreckage that had once been the pride of the Trontari fleet. She felt no victory in this moment, only the cold understanding that the war for humanity's survival had truly begun. We've only just started, Alexis replied. And the galaxy will know that when humanity breaks, it breaks everything in its path. The first cost of war. The Trontari fleet had retreated, but the Unity was far from safe. What had begun as a seemingly victorious counterattack quickly descended into uncertainty. The Trontari might have been thrown back for now, but their retreat wasn't one of surrender. It was a calculated repositioning, a regrouping before the inevitable storm would come crashing down upon humanity. As the Unity drifted among the debris of the wreckage, Alexis Grant stood before the panoramic window in the command deck. She could still see the remnants of the Trontari flagship burning in the distance, a symbol of humanity's first major victory in this new war. But the taste of triumph was bitter, clouded by the knowledge that this victory was temporary at best. We've won a battle, not the war, Alexis muttered to herself, her voice barely audible over the hum of the ship's engines. Despite her steely resolve, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were only delaying the inevitable. The Trontari were relentless. The question wasn't whether they would return, it was when. Commander, Lieutenant Harper's voice broke through her thoughts. We're receiving a transmission from High Command. Alexis turned to face him, her expression hardening. Patch it through. Let's see what they have to say. The flickering holographic display above the communications console hummed to life, revealing an image of Admiral Lewis as humanity's most senior officer in the Galactic Defense Alliance. He appeared tense, his face drawn as if the weight of the galaxy rested upon his shoulders. Commander Grant, Admiral Lewis's voice boomed, filled with authority. You've done the impossible today. But I'm afraid I have bad news. Alexis felt a knot form in her stomach, but she didn't flinch. What's the situation, Admiral? We've intercepted multiple signals from Trontari forces. They're regrouping, and they're calling in reinforcements. We've confirmed the arrival of a second wave of ships. The Trontari are shifting their strategy. This was a feint. Harper's expression hardened. A diversion? That's not good. How many more ships are we talking about? Thousands, Admiral Lewis replied gravely. A full assault is on the way. The Trontari are preparing for a galaxy-wide offensive. They've already attacked several key colonies. Your victory today was, well, it gave us time. But that's all it did. Time. The weight of the words struck Alexis like a physical blow. They had won a battle, but the war was far from over. The very thing they had feared for so long was now unfolding before them. The Trontari weren't just invading, they were preparing to destroy humanity's colonies and establish their dominance across the stars. "We can't let them do that," Alexis said, her voice low but firm. "We'll stand and fight." "I'm counting on you, Commander," Admiral Lewis said, his voice tight with the burden of leadership. "Humanity has always had a way of surprising our enemies. I need you to keep the Unity in fighting shape. We need more than a few ships, we need to unite our forces. We need to buy time for the fleet to regroup." "We'll do what we can," Alexis replied, her gaze fixed on the distant stars. "But we need reinforcements. The Unity alone won't be enough to hold back an entire fleet." Admiral Lewis's face softened, just a fraction. "We're sending what we can, but it's a galaxy-wide war now. Don't expect miracles. Prepare for the worst." The transmission ended, leaving Alexis standing in silence. She turned to Harper, who had been listening intently. "Get me a status update on our remaining fleet," she said. "We need every ship we can get." "We're already coordinating with nearby systems, Commander," Harper replied. "But reinforcements will take time. Time we might not have." Alexis nodded, her mind racing. Every move they made now had to count. The Trontari were out for blood, and they weren't going to stop until humanity was crushed beneath their boots. The Unity continued to drift in the debris field, its systems recovering slowly from the earlier damage. Though the ship was far from its prime, it was still humanity's best hope. Alexis had no illusions about the challenges ahead, but she wasn't about to give up now. The Trontari may have been powerful, but humanity had always fought back, often against impossible odds. This time would be no different. Kara stood beside her at the command console, her gaze fixed on the strategic map of the galaxy. It was a map she'd seen countless times, but today it looked different. Today, it was a battlefield. "What are you thinking?" Kara asked quietly. "We need a plan," Alexis said, her voice sharp. "We can't just sit here and wait for the Trontari to come to us. We need to hit them before they hit us." Kara raised an eyebrow. "You want to attack? After everything we've just been through? Why wait?" Alexis replied, her eyes hardening. "If we can break their momentum now, we stand a better chance of surviving their assault. But we need to act fast. The longer we wait, the more territory they'll gain. And once they have enough ground, there'll be no stopping them." Kara nodded, a small smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "I like the way you think. But we'll need every available ship to pull that off. Not just the Unity." "I know," Alexis said. "That's why I'm calling in every favor we've got left. If we're going to take the fight to them, we need to show the galaxy that humanity is willing to risk everything." The next few hours were a blur of strategic decisions and frantic coordination. The Unity sent out messages to every known human fleet, from the distant colony worlds to the front lines of the Outer Rim. Alexis knew they couldn't win this war alone. They needed to unite the scattered remnants of humanity's military forces into a single, cohesive unit. "Lieutenant Harper," Alexis said as she reviewed the incoming transmissions. "Get the fleet commanders on a secure channel. We need to make sure everyone's on the same page." Harper nodded, his fingers flying over the console as he set up the communication channels. Within minutes, the voices of several fleet commanders crackled through the comms system. Alexis stood before the console, ready to take charge. "This is Commander Alexis Grant of the Unity," she said, her voice calm but commanding. "I know things are looking grim, but we've been through worse. We've been underestimated for far too long. Today, we turn the tide. We will strike first. This is a galaxy-wide war, and humanity will not go down without a fight." The fleet commanders responded with various levels of agreement, some more confident than others. But the message was clear: humanity was not backing down. The Unity led the charge as the newly assembled fleet of human ships surged forward into Trontari-controlled space. Alexis knew the risks. The Trontari had the advantage in terms of firepower and numbers, but humanity had something else, the element of surprise and their ability to adapt quickly. This battle wasn't just about strength, it was about fighting smart. "Commander, we're approaching the Trontari defense line," Harper called out, his voice steady as ever. Alexis looked out at the approaching enemy fleet. "Get ready. We take them head-on." The battle began with a roar. Plasma fire erupted across the vast expanse of space as the human fleet clashed with the Trontari. Alexis's heart raced, but her mind was clear. This was their moment to prove themselves. Humanity wasn't just going to survive, they were going to show the galaxy what they were made of. The day humanity fought back. The vastness of space was filled with the sounds of war. Plasma blasts erupted between the two opposing fleets, the human forces, led by the Unity, clashing with the relentless power of the Trontari. The battle had escalated from a chaotic skirmish into a full-scale war. Ships on both sides were breaking apart, their hulks torn by explosions and the relentless assault of advanced weaponry. In the heart of the chaos, Commander Alexis Grant stood at the command console of the Unity, her eyes sharp and focused. The mission was simple: strike hard and fast, disable the Trontari fleet's ability to regroup, and buy humanity enough time to organize a counteroffensive. They were facing the might of the Trontari, but Alexis knew one thing for certain: this wasn't a battle humanity could afford to lose. Damage report. Alexis barked as the ship trembled from a nearby blast. The Unity was a massive flagship, but it was far from invincible. Every hit they took threatened to bring them closer to disaster. "We've sustained damage to the outer hull and the engines," reported Lieutenant Kara Draven, her voice steady despite the situation. "Shields are at 30%, and we've lost 2 of our long-range turrets. The Trontari flagship is still intact, but we're wearing them down." Alexis clenched her fists. They had been fighting for hours, and their fleet was holding its ground, but at what cost? The Trontari fleet had superior numbers and firepower, and the longer the battle raged on, the more their situation looked dire. Still, Alexis refused to show any sign of retreat. Not when humanity's survival was on the line. "Push forward," Alexis said, her voice steely. "Target their command ship. We need to take them down before they regroup." As the Unity surged forward, its weapons lighting up with a deadly barrage, Alexis turned to face her crew. "Humanity has always fought back against impossible odds," she said, her voice carrying across the bridge. "We don't stop now. Not ever." The human fleet pressed forward, relentlessly hammering the Trontari with everything they had. The sound of plasma fire was deafening as it sliced through the dark expanse of space. The Trontari flagship, a gargantuan warship bristling with weapons, returned fire with deadly accuracy, its powerful shields absorbing the human fleet's shots, but it was starting to show signs of strain. Inside the Unity, the atmosphere was tense. Crew members worked furiously at their stations, each movement timed with military precision. Kara, standing beside Alexis, kept her eyes locked on the display. "Captain, we're getting a transmission from the Trontari flagship," Kara said, her voice low but urgent. "It's a direct line." "Put it through," Alexis ordered, her pulse quickening as she prepared for what was to come. A hologram flickered to life in front of them, showing a towering Trontari commander, his sharp features distorted by the harsh lighting of the flagship's bridge. His eyes glowed with a menacing red light, and his voice was deep and guttural. "Commander Grant," the Trontari said, his tone mocking. "You are a persistent species, but your efforts are futile. Surrender now, and I will spare your remaining ships. Continue this defiance, and I will ensure you are wiped from existence." Alexis's eyes narrowed. She had expected the Trontari to make an offer of surrender, but she wasn't about to let this be their final act of defiance. The time for negotiations was over. "We'll never surrender," Alexis said, her voice cold and firm. "You want to wipe us out? Then come and try." The Trontari commander's lips curled into a smile, showing his sharp teeth. Very well. Prepare to be exterminated. With that, the transmission cut off and Alexis turned back to the battle. We're not done yet. Kara, get us in close to their flagship. We need to hit them with everything we have. Harper, standing at the navigation console, didn't hesitate. Aye, Commander. Diverting power to engines. We're going in. The Unity surged forward, cutting through the battlefield as the remaining human ships followed close behind. The Trontari flagship loomed larger on the screen, its massive guns charging for another blast. Ready the secondary array, Alexis ordered, her voice steady despite the chaos. Target their weapons systems. We need to take them down before they fire again. The Unity shook under another barrage of Trontari fire, but it held firm. The secondary array was humanity's last hope, a weapon designed to bypass enemy shields and deliver a devastating blow. It was the ship's most powerful offensive tool, but it was also incredibly dangerous, even to the Unity. Commander, are you sure about this? Kara asked, her voice filled with concern. Firing the secondary array at this range, it could damage the Unity. I don't have time for second guessing, Alexis replied, her eyes locked on the enemy ship. We fire now, or we don't fire at all. Kara hesitated for a moment before nodding. Understood. Firing sequence initiated, Vera said from her station. Target locked. Secondary array charging. The hum of the ship's engines became a deep growl as the secondary array powered up, its energy building to a critical level. Alexis's heart raced as the countdown began. Fire, she commanded. The Unity's weapons roared to life, and a pulse of blinding energy shot forward, striking the Trontari flagship. The blast tore through the enemy's shields, shattering their defenses in a single, devastating hit. The flagship's outer hull cracked and groaned under the assault, the sheer force of the energy pulse sending shockwaves through its structure. But it wasn't enough to destroy the Trontari flagship. The ship was still functional, its engines still firing, though it was visibly weakened. The Trontari weren't giving up yet. Prepare for the final push, Alexis said, her voice unwavering. We need to take them down, now. The final push came from a place of desperation. The Trontari flagship was wounded, but it wasn't dead. Alexis knew that their time was running out, and the battle was nearing its critical point. The remaining human ships were pushing forward with everything they had, but it was clear that if they didn't destroy the Trontari flagship, the entire fleet would fall apart. We can't take another hit, Kara said, her voice tight with urgency. If that flagship fires again, we're done for. We've got one chance, Alexis said, her gaze sharp and determined. Get us in close. We'll finish this with a full-force strike. Harper's fingers flew over the console. Closing the gap. Full speed ahead. The Unity accelerated toward the Trontari flagship, the remaining human ships following close behind. The final moments of the battle were upon them. The Trontari had no more tricks to play. It was do or die. Shields at maximum, Kara said, her voice steady but tense. Ready weapons. The Unity was almost in range now. The Trontari flagship was charging its weapons, the massive cannons preparing to fire. But Alexis wasn't waiting. As the Unity closed in, she gave the order. Fire everything. The weapons of the Unity came to life in unison, firing a concentrated barrage of plasma and particle energy straight into the Trontari flagship's vulnerable core. The explosion that followed was a cataclysmic event. Flashes of white-hot light filled the void of space as the Trontari flagship buckled under the attack. It shattered, its once imposing silhouette now a broken wreck of twisted metal and burning debris. The Trontari fleet, leaderless and in disarray, began to retreat. The remaining ships scattered, no longer following a unified command, as their morale crumbled. In the aftermath, as the battle subsided, Alexis allowed herself a moment to breathe. The Unity was heavily damaged, and so were the other human ships, but they had done it. They had won. The Trontari fleet had been broken. We did it, Kara said quietly, disbelief evident in her voice. Alexis looked out at the vastness of space, the debris of the destroyed Trontari ships floating around them. The victory was hard won, but humanity had held its ground. We fought, Kara, Alexis said, her voice steadied but filled with exhaustion. And we broke them. But she knew the war wasn't over. The Trontari might have been beaten today, but the battle for humanity's future had only just begun. The galaxy had seen what humanity was capable of. And no one, not even the Trontari, would ever forget the day humans finally broke.